Democracy is a way of government in which all the people are supposed to have voice in the decisions of their government and elect their representatives with the majority of the votes took as the final choice.
Capitalism is where an economic system known as free market has in ownership or owners who have the right to claim things. They have the right to say what is yours and what is theirs is theirs. It is where an economic system has a lot of people who are powerful and have a lot of reproduction and productions.
We are in the year of 1789. A huge revolt is occurring here at France. People are very angry because of how Louis XVI is using his money. Now the whole country is in bankrupt. A very huge revolution is approaching, and with it, many heads will be cut all around the country. People fight for liberty, equality, and fraternity. People are fighting to take Louis from the throne, and we will choose our leaders now. Like for example, that general named Napoleon Bonaparte. He could be a very good leader if we just give him one chance. He will prove us that he is ready to do it. This movement will increase a lot French democracy, because now we could choose our leaders.
Napoleon's expedition to Egypt in 1798 was an event that had a great impact in the Middle East. Napoleon Bonaparte was always looking for new glories, and one of these were the domination of France in the fascinating East. An important fact about this is that Napoleon always thought of his country as a place full of myths, great history, although he felt Europe was just too small for him and that all greatness was in the East. He definitely wanted to make more legends, and this is where he started to act not in the right way, because even though he knew he didn't have the amount of military in order to conquer the East, he still did it. Back then, Egyptians had been ruled by one of the most powerful in the Middle East, known as the Mamelukes. The Mamelukes were known as beautiful and really efficient crowd with incredible horses. Even Napoleon recognized their courage. The French preparation had a large army, although not large enough for Egypt. As I mentioned before, they had a good army for the beginning, though not for the whole war. This army included Murat, Mormont, Alexander Dumas, and many more. Napoleon divided his army into 5 squares, which were consisted of men kneeling and standing and firing, so they could have a non-stop firing. All of this made the French lose about 30 men, while the Mamelukes lost about 6,000. This battle was over in about an hour, and Bonaparte led his army to Cairo. He had this dream where he would establish a new religion in the Middle East, as well as establishing an empire, though all of his dreams were destroyed because of the British blowing the French fleets to pieces. This helped increase capitalism because while all of this has happened, minerals were gathered and studied. Local trades and industries were analyzed since Napoleon brought scientists, engineers, and scholars in order to capture Egyptian culture.
The Alexandria expedition of 1807 was part of an operation during the Napoleonic Wars by the Royal Navy and the British Army in Alexandria, Egypt. The British purpose was to establish themselves in the north coast of Egypt to have territories in the Mediterranean Sea. The purpose of this operation was to establish a base of operations in the Mediterranean Sea to fight the Ottoman Empire, since it had an alliance with the French led by the Ottoman Sultan Selim III. This expedition was part of a whole strategy to defeat Napoleon and stop the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. British forces then extended Alexandria with 5,000 troops led by Alexander Mackenzie Fraser, and some of the people of Alexandria, however, being unaffected, opened their gates to the British and some of them fought. And even though it would be easy for the British to establish themselves, they failed in their mission and did not achieve any goal. They actually increased the relation between the Ottoman Empire and the French. Just like in the Berlin Conference, this event did not help or contribute to democracy in any way, since the British entered Egypt without their consent and tried to establish themselves in their territory. The Argentine War of Independence was fought from 1810 to 1818, and their purpose was the same as the rest of Latin America's. to get independence from the Spanish crown. This movement and their forces were led by Manuel Belgrano, Juan José Castelli, and Juan José de San Martín. In August 20, 1806, the first British invasion was defeated by Argentina in Rio de la Plata, but they attacked again a year later, and the invasion was defeated again in July 7, 1807. In 1808, Napoleon invades Spain and starts the Peninsular War, making the Spanish troops weaker and making it the perfect moment for Latin America to fight for independence. In 1810, Spain was dominated by the French forces, and Argentine people organized a meeting to start the independence movement called the Primera Junta. In 1811, Paraguay becomes independent, and this movement helps Argentina and inspires them to keep fighting. In 1812, the flag of Argentina was created by Manuel Belgrano, one of the leaders of the movement for independence. The next year, José de San Martín defeats a troop in Montevideo in the Battle of San Lorenzo, one of the most important battles in this war, but Spain gets the power of its own crown again, and absolutism is restored. In 1816, San Martín is appointed head of the Army of the Andes, and his troops fought in the range of the Andes. Finally, on July 9, 1816, the Assembly met in San Miguel de Tucumán, declared full independence with provisions for a natural constitution. This event obviously contributed to democracy in Argentina because people fought for their independence and to establish a democratic republic as we know it today.
Central America is a small region composed of 5 countries that are Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. Since 1813, in Central America, people started to fight to gain independence, but José Bustamante's government fought against the people that wanted independence. In 1818, Carlos Urrutia came to power. This made the Central Americans revolutionaries gain power to get independence. And finally, in 1821, Gabino Gainza came to power. He was known because of his weak character and his elderly. This was something that the Central Americans took advantage of, and because of the pressure of people, Gainza made a conference in which the main topic was the independence. In that conference, José Cecilio del Valle said a speech in which he talked about independence. So he redacted the Constitution of Independence, and the independence was finally proclaimed the 15th of September of 1821. This was something that increased the democracy in Central America. Now they will be free from Spain.
The Opium Wars. These wars were between 1839 to 1860. The first war was between Great Britain and China, while the second was between Britain and France against China. These wars represent China willing to stop the opium trade, which was a really bad drug. British leaders were getting opium drugs in China with no authority, therefore it was illegal. All of these led to nothing but serious economic and social problems in China. An event that occurred while all of this was happening and that decreased a lot more the problems between Britain and China was some drunken British sailors killing a Chinese. And on top of that, British government did not give those sailors to China because the British did not trust China legal system. Eventually, British forces were victorious. The Treaty of Nanjing, as well as the British Supplementary Treaty of Bok, made a payment for the large debt China had, and also it paid for the opening of 5 ports for trading and for the British citizens to be able to be tried by British court. The French joined this war through an excuse, which was about the murder of French missionary in China. The French and the British started this war in 1857, where they made China, in an obligatory way, to sign the treaties of Nanjing, which gave the opening of new ports for Western trade, foreign travel in China, and many more. And in the future negotiations, even the opium drug was legalized. China at the beginning refused to all of this, though after seeing what the Allies do because of their rejection, they accepted it. This definitely decreased China's democracy since they stopped getting the right to choose for themselves after all of this, though it gave a lot of power to all of these foreign countries and definitely increased their capitalism after all the trading that was happening.
The Civil War had its outbreak with 7 southern states seceded from the USA, Those states were South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, known as the Confederates, leaving what are the rest of the northern states to join the Union, and letting some be just in the border. After Lincoln took presidency in 1861, the Confederate force decided to attack Fort Sumter. After Lincoln ordered troops to protect it, the shots of the Civil War were first given by the Confederates. Major Robert Anderson surrendered after 2 days of bombarding, letting the Confederates take Fort Sumter. Four more states decided to join the Confederates, which were Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. There were some known battles, such as the Battle of Gettysburg or the Battle of Fort Sumter. Each side had its own president and commanders, but the commanders would change from battle to battle. The Confederates, under the presidency of Jefferson Davis and the commanding of Robert E. Lee, tried to regain their lost power by attacking Fort Stedman, but they were eventually counterattacked. They finally surrendered to Abraham Lincoln and the commander Ulysses S. Grant at the Pomatox Courthouse on April 9th in the year of 1865. On April 14th, just after 5 days of surrendering war, at the Ford's Theater, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, decided to ambush and achieve the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. To end up the war in an effective and definitive way, on April 26th, Sherman received Johnston's surrender.
In 1867, the British made the British North America Act, which gave to the country now known as Canada the provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Canada. This act also divided the province of Canada into the provinces of Quebec and Ontario, and provided them with constitutions. The act was the Canadian Constitution since 1867 until 1982. Later, in 1982, the name was changed to Canada's Constitution Act of 1982. A few years later of 1867, 6 more provinces were added. Those provinces were Manitoba, British Columbia, Prince Edward Island, Alberta and Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland. This act gives democracy to Canadians because now they can decide what to do with their territories.
On an event that marks the birth of modern Japan, patriotic samurai from Japan's outlying domains joined with anti-shogunate nobles in restoring the emperor to power after 700 years. Soon after seizing power, the Emperor Meiji and his ministers moved to a royal court from Kyoto to Tokyo and destroyed feudalism. The newly unified Japanese government also set off on a path of rapid industrialization and militarization, building Japan into a major world power by the early 20th century.
The Suez Canal had a great impact in the Middle East in 1869. The first country to like and think about a canal in order to improve the world trade was Egypt. The opening of this specific canal was noticeable the importance of Egypt to European trade. This canal not only had a much better and easier access between Europe and India, but also it opened the doors for the British to occupy Egypt. In the inauguration, many literary roles attended, as well as the King of Prussia and many other important people. This canal was known to be the shortest connection between the East and the West because of its unique geographical area. This canal definitely made an impact on world trade, since everything was moving and being traded in such a short amount of time. Though eventually Egypt's debt was too high that it had to sell the canal to the United Kingdom, but it was okay because it was decided to be available for all the nations. Once this canal opened, capitalism was over the place, since all the products, everything trading was increasing more and more in such a fast way.